In the upcoming series of topics dealing with norm violations, we will be discussing behaviors that many people find morally objectionable. Morality certainly plays a big role in these topics. If there wasn't this subjective concern, they wouldn't be social problems, would they? Beliefs about morality definitely have their place in society, but not so much in sociology. In the discussions we will be having about what should and should not be legal, we need to focus on scientific data and be objective. In other words, you should think like sociologists. Because we are so accustomed to the rules and the way things are, we often overlook some of the reasoning, or lack of reasoning in some cases, that determines what we as a society define as illegal. These next few chapters are especially interesting because they highlight the rather arbitrary nature of where we draw the line between legal and illegal behavior. Like how legislators have determined that a 16-year-old is responsible enough to drive a car, but not responsible enough to make their own decisions about having sex. Or that an 18-year-old can get married, join the military, vote, and smoke cigarettes, but can't drink alcohol. I personally am fascinated by the nuances that change an act or substance from legal to criminal. I hope you will enjoy exploring these topics too. Social problems related to sexual behavior, alcohol and drugs, violence, crime, and criminal justice all involve the violation of social norms. Norms are the rules or codes of conduct that a society sets for itself. They can range from folkways, right versus rude, to mores, right versus wrong, to taboos, really wrong. One common folkway states that if a person is entering or exiting a room directly behind you, you ought to hold the door for them, especially if you are male and they are female. Another directs us to wait until everyone is served to begin eating. Mores are more serious and reflect society's moral beliefs such as stealing, adultery, and battery. The mores that a society determines to be most important become codified into laws. Taboos, which are almost always illegal, are norms that, when violated, bring about a feeling of disgust or anger in members of the society. Examples of taboos include incest and child pornography and child prostitution. Chapter 3 focuses on two violations of social norms related to sex: prostitution and pornography. In the not-too-distant past, homosexuality was also a topic that would have been covered in this chapter. However, with growing scientific evidence that homosexuality is not a choice but a genetic predisposition, it has come to be widely accepted as a sexual identity rather than a deviant activity. Now we discuss this topic primarily as a part of gender rather than deviance. You may think of sex as a purely personal matter. However, from a sociological perspective, it is not. From our choices in partners, to laws governing what and who is legal between the sheets, to the way that sex is portrayed in the media, to the roles that our significant others play in monitoring and restricting our sexual behavior, sex is a social matter. All societies control or channel the sexual behavior of their members, typically through marriage and the family. The way our society defines normal sexual behavior is heterosexuality, monogamy, and fidelity. This map shows the different ages of consent in the 50 states. The age of consent is 16 years in 30 states, 17 years in 8 states, and 18 years in 12 states, including California. Paraphilia is another term for sexual deviance. Examples of paraphilia include homosexuality, pedophilia, sadism and masochism, prostitution, and pornography. During the 1950s and 60s, sex was portrayed in a much different way in the media than it is today. For example, couples, even married ones, slept in separate beds on TV, as in this example from I Love Lucy. There was no sex at all in movies, only innuendo. The mention of birth control was even considered obscene. Even a risque magazine like Playboy wouldn't run condom ads back in the 60s. Prostitution is referred to as the world's oldest profession because it has always existed in some form everywhere since ancient times. The views held about prostitutes have ranged from great respect to tolerance to disgust and everything in between. These views in turn have affected the laws surrounding prostitution. Currently in the United States, prostitution is only legal in parts of Nevada. From a functionalist perspective, prostitution serves many social functions. The first and most obvious is that it satisfies the sexual needs that are not met elsewhere. By meeting these needs, prostitution also acts as a means of controlling sexual behavior in that it channels sexual desires away from unwilling women. According to the text, in Latin countries, prostitution is seen as a necessary evil that keeps hot-blooded Latin men away from pure and innocent women. In any situation where there is a product or service that people want, and the sale of that commodity is prohibited by law, a black market will emerge to satisfy the demand. Black markets are based on symbiosis, mutually beneficial relationships. In this relationship, the provider, or prostitute in this case, benefits by making an income, while the purchaser, or the John or client, benefits by receiving sexual gratification. Another player in this relationship are those who are responsible for suppressing the activity, law enforcement. Not only does the black market provide them with a job, after all, what would cops do if there was no crime? But corrupt officers can also enjoy a lucrative side business of collecting bribes and payoffs from those who operate within the black market. Feminism emerged from conflict theory, and within feminist theory there is a split when it comes to the issue of prostitution. Some feminists view prostitution as the exploitation and degradation of women for the benefit and pleasure of men. Others believe that a woman has a right to choose her profession and sell her body. In both cases, women are seen as being oppressed by men, either in terms of how they are treated and portrayed, or in terms of having their rights infringed upon. There are many types of prostitutes, and they are ranked in a hierarchy. At the top are call girls, followed by house prostitutes, bar girls, and streetwalkers. Streetwalkers are the least respected, most likely to be arrested, and most researched group of prostitutes. Gigolos, or male prostitutes who service women, are so rare that they could practically be considered mythological, right up there with unicorns. Males are a small minority of prostitutes, and of those, almost all of them service other men. When looking at the lives that prostitutes led before entering the life, we find several commonalities. Half of them were victims of rape, and another 33% experienced other sexual abuse. Most were sexually active at a very early age, usually around 13 years old. Many women were emotionally deprived as children or victims of abuse and neglect. This abuse weakens the familial bonds and makes them more susceptible to being lured away by a pimp, who gains the trust and devotion of these young girls by initiating the relationship as a love interest or boyfriend. Many girls came from broken homes, dropped out of school, and have a record. Like their female counterparts, homosexual prostitutes are ranked in a hierarchy. At the top are the escorts and models, then the bar hustlers, followed by the street hustlers. Some identify as heterosexual, or gay for pay. The text defines pornography as writings, pictures, or objects of a sexual nature that people object to as being filthy or immoral. However, in real life, determining what is or is not porn is very difficult. Americans spend over $10 billion a year on adult products. This is an obscene amount of money. Ha ha ha. This includes books, magazines, movies, phone sex, live shows like strip clubs, and sex toys. This figure is about the same as the domestic box office receipts for all Hollywood movies. More money is spent at strip clubs than at Broadway theaters, regional theaters, and the symphony combined. Technology has had a huge effect on pornography. Peep shows have moved out of small shops into the home through home video and cable TV. Profits from pornography have shifted from seedy movie theaters and bookstores to video stores, hotel chains, and Fortune 500 satellite and cable companies. By 1979, hardcore porn accounted for 75% of all video sales. Porn is said to be responsible for the successful launch of the VCR. The internet now dominates the adult entertainment industry and vice versa. Only just recently did social networking bypass pornography as the #1 use of the internet. The Supreme Court has ruled that obscene speech is not protected by the First Amendment. However, terms like obscenity, pornography, and indecency are not easily defined, and their meanings have shifted over the years. Very often, it comes down to a matter of taste, and wouldn't you know it, the tastes of the elite usually determine social policy. This is where conflict theory comes in. Think about how society reacts to nudity in museum artwork and Broadway shows versus in girly magazines and strip clubs. Social policy is concerned with the cause and effect relationships between pornography and other acts of sexual deviance, and also with individuals' right to privacy. Those who wish to restrict or outlaw pornography base their beliefs on the trigger theory. The Meese Commission on Pornography concluded in 1986 that nearly all pornography conveyed degrading images of women that encouraged violence against them. This provided the basis for the anti-porn campaigns of Presidents Reagan and Bush. Ironically, this led to a huge spike in the consumption of porn in the U.S. In spite of their efforts, 15 years later, annual expenditures on hardcore video rentals were 10 times more than the year before the policies went into action. Those who wish to eliminate restrictions on pornography believe that pornography acts as a safety valve. Denmark and Japan both legalized the sale of hardcore porn based on this theory. After legalization, there was a steep rise in consumption followed by a long, steady decline. In Denmark, the sex abuse of children also declined, and the most common reaction to viewing 1 hour of hardcore porn was boredom. In Japan, legalization was also correlated to a decline in rape. Some believe that simply by removing the forbidden label, porn will lose its appeal. When it comes to privacy, social policies try to maintain a balance between an individual's right to privacy regarding their sexual practices and the right of other individuals not to be exposed to things that they find offensive.